Hello and welcome to From the Vault, episode 14. I'm your host Dan Wren, and with me as always is Nathaniel. How you doing, Nathaniel?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, Dan. I'm having a good week. It's a good time. Okay. Life's great.
That's good. So what have we been up to lately? We had the RPTQ last weekend.
We had the RPTQ last weekend in lovely, sunny Milton Keynes.
It was really sunny though.
It was very sunny. I really can't comment on any of the rest of it.
Yeah, Milton Keynes is not the best destination for tournament Magic.
It's a lovely London suburb.
I mean, I've been to a lot of really cool places with Magic.
And we've seen very little of them.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, Milton Keynes was average. You got in on the Saturday night. I got in early on Sunday morning because I had a very busy Saturday myself.
And by early, many listeners may think, oh, early Sunday morning. That means like 8 a.m. No. Dan got a night bus and arrived at the Milton Keynes bus station at 5 a.m.
It turns out the Milton Keynes bus station isn't even in Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes bus station, not even in Milton Keynes, yeah.
Absolutely. So that was frustrating. But I got some sleep. I'm really good at sleeping while traveling. I think that's one thing that Magic has made me really good at, is catching shut-eye where I can. And I was
Magic is really boring, so it has gotten me to sleep many times.
I was pretty fresh on Sunday, actually. I was feeling all right. I had a quick nap when I got into the hotel. And then we rumbled with Sean Ferguson. So, reminder for anyone who's not been listening to our ravings for the last few weeks as we prepare for this godforsaken format. We were on green-white midrange in the middle seat, myself. We had blue-black control, piloted by Sean. And you were on Wizard Red, I think is the name.
I guess it's Wizard Red. It was just the Aaron Barrach build of mono red. No Flame of Kelds, because
none of that nonsense.
Card's kind of like, But Hazarets and Gitu Lava Runners and Wizard's Lightnings, it was okay. It was fine. It was red. It was mono red.
Yeah, I don't know. I did really like it though, because I think it's a good hedge in the mirror and against the against the control deck. So we kind of expected to see quite a lot of that between what we were going to see in the room.
Logic dictates it's like roughly 2/3 of the field, because every team's going to have a red deck, and it's most likely to be mono red, and because it takes up less cards, and every team's going to have a control deck. This turned out to not be totally true.
Folks, maybe?
This turned out to not be totally true. Although actually several of the gift teams did have a control deck still. They had blue-black control commonly.
That's true, yeah, because you can split those cards.
But there was, I think that Duncan Tang's team forwent a control deck and instead played white-black. The kind of High Street of Benalia mid-range deck.
Yeah.
Which I think is an interesting decision. Not one I expected many people to make, because I felt like the control decks were stronger than the History of Benalia decks by enough of a degree that you'd rather play the control decks. And History of Benalia was quite a greedy... they're like the white-black midrange deck is quite a greedy deck in terms of cards that it wants. But they made it worlike. They ended up top 8ing, so I can't really fault them. And definitely, like, if you decide that you like the white-black midrange deck, then like they found an interesting way to fit it into their lineup, which I think is commendable.
I think it's got a good... it has a good blue-white matchup, which there was a good amount of blue-white in the room. And Martin Clement, who was piloting the deck, had been playing it for the last few weeks on Modo to some good results, and just kind of thought, well, this fits in the lineup, and let's rock it. And Toolcraft is a slightly better choice in the light of seeing what we decided would be less chain whirlers than your average kind of individual tournament. So there they had, as you said, they had mono red, gift, and black white. I think this is a good... Oh, let's just finish on how we did, which was not very well.
If you looked only at the first 2 rounds of the tournament, then we were among the top teams.
Yes.
But if you looked any further, then we were not.
Correct. We didn't do very well in syncing things up. Well, I don't know if we... Anyway, I lost the first 2 matches. You guys carried me. And then my deck woke up and started doing competent things. This is a pretty standard problem for the green decks. The inconsistencies are horrible. Then my deck looked like an absolute world beater. While, you guys ran some poor draws and... we kind of exited at that point. We kept playing for a couple more rounds just because we kind of lost at that weird point where it wasn't early enough for us to actually join any side events and get the amazing Axiom prizes, but it was a bit too late. And it was, sorry. And basically it was too late to join those, is what I'm trying to say. So
we didn't drop early enough to be able to join the side events, but we weren't late enough that we had to go get our trains immediately. So we just kind of had a couple of rounds where we're like, well, we're dead for top 8, but I guess we'll keep playing. And the prizes for main event were actually quite poor for anyone who didn't end up getting the Pro Tour invite. And so there were 97 teams at this event and 2 invites up for grabs, which, as someone put it, is like, it's sort of like 6 invites. So it's kind of like you're getting more invites. Like per RPTQ, but also there's significantly more people there. And if we actually, it's hard to actually view it as 6 invites, I think. There's 2 invites up for grabs among 97 competitors. Oof.
Yeah, that was pretty rough.
Additionally, top 8 didn't even get an invite back to the next RPTQ. Only top 4 got an invite to the next RPTQ. Top 8 got mats.
So I think
if you got into the top 8 and lost your quarterfinal, you got a playmat and then like a booster box.
So I think this is a good transition into the top 8 because although our showing wasn't fantastic, overall the Scottish showing was decent. So we've already mentioned Tang's team was playing with old school player Stu and Mush, and they actually top 4'd and unfortunately lost their semi-final, which commiserations to them, but absolute fantastic run. And Tang played Gift, which is what he's been playing for the last couple months. To it
feels like it's longer than that. I think he's been playing it since like the cards Godfather's Gift got released.
Couple is definitely the way you use that word, where it doesn't actually mean 2. Several months is probably the better way to say it. But good job there. And then we also had who was on Rayna's team? I'm just trying to remember. There was Anand and... At any rate, we had another Scottish team in the top 8 who unfortunately lost in quarterfinals as well. It was most unfortunate. And then finally, there was Autumn and Stephen's team, Stephen Murray, who unfortunately had to face off against Tang's team in the quarterfinal, and Tang's team prevailed to go through the semi. So a pretty decent showing overall for Scottish players, which was great. It's a real shame that nobody could really go away with the invite, but still really fantastic results all around. I think that the teams that won, I do know that a Croatian team took one of the invites. I can't recall the other one. I think that the other one was a British team, but that's a good point actually to mention. There were I felt like there were quite a lot of teams that had travelled from Europe for this tournament.
Well, it's because there wasn't any other chances. If you had a qualification and you weren't able to make it to one of the other European ones, this was like the last weekend for it. And those European ones were also enormous. We had 97 teams. The first round in Bologna had 140 or something similar. It was either 120 or 140. It was a very large number of
teams.
For
2 invites.
Yeah, for 2 invites. Actually, I don't know. Maybe they went over the cap to get to 4. I don't know if... I'm not really... Don't quote me on any of these things. Because I don't remember exactly how many invites get handed out. But, 140 teams for 4 invites doesn't exactly sound like that exciting either.
No, for sure. So, we actually faced off against an Italian team, I think, after we were dead. And actually the team that we died to did go on to make top 8. That was Callum Busfield's team, who, unfortunately didn't get one of the invites either. So that was kind of the RPTQ in a nutshell. I don't really want to talk about this format anymore. I'm pretty sick of it, to be quite honest.
I think that's a prevailing feeling. The format is... I think I at least find the format boring to talk about that much when you don't have like an actual tournament coming up for it. Partly because, I find that about many formats, but I find this format specifically boring because the standard format that it's kind of based on is so developed that we're at a point where it's like, okay, well, everyone needs to have a red deck because red is so good.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of like clear, distinct decisions you can make after that point, but it doesn't really feel all that nuanced or deep, really, because like a third of your work is immediately done. So I enjoyed building Unified Modern, for example. Like building Unified Modern lineups is really interesting. If it's when you have like players who are like, okay, so these are the sorts of things I'm good at, and these are the sorts of decks I like playing, and finding the places where you can kind of find good decks that don't share cards. At certain points in the history of the Modern format have been very interesting.
Mm-hmm. You can sort of say like, this is my wheelhouse, and this is this is kind of what we expect to an extent, and yeah, you're right. There's just a lot more play, I guess, to the preparation. I don't know.
Yeah, wait. So it doesn't feel like you're sticking someone with like a bad deck just because it's the only thing you can fit into the lineup. And B, nobody's like everyone's lineups will start from a slightly different place. Right now, I'm not sure that's technically true because I think most people will start with, okay, well, we should have a humans deck, or right, someone should play humans. And then after that, probably someone should play Tron. And then probably someone should play like Hollow One.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. Maybe there's some deviations there. But I feel like currently the kind of unified Modern, as it were, based on the actual Modern format, is a little bit narrower than it has been in the past. But I think there have been certainly like lots and lots of points in Modern's past where you're like, well, there's tons of decks we can fit into tons of lineups. And they all start from totally different beginning points.
For sure.
So it's a much more interesting format to theorycraft around, whereas the standard one was kind of like, all right, well, you have to start from this point, and then that fills in this other section for you, so okay. And in fact, the toughest thing was trying to see if you could make a lineup work that literally just didn't play any green cards.
Yeah, which we kind of touched on last week, and we sort of made the call that we were going to stick with it, which I think was the right call, even though obviously the result wasn't phenomenal. But I do think that sticking to our guns at that point in preparation was correct. But I mean, yeah, let's move on.
If you ever want to talk to us about Unified Standard, please don't. That is all. There's
just so much energy into the preparation and all the kind of, I mean, even so I was saying before we started recording, the game Discord is shutting down the Unified Standard channel, and the general, because all the RPCQs are done, so one of the mods was saying, oh well, I'm going to shut this at 6 p.m. or whatever, and everybody's response was just, goodbye to this, I don't want to have to ever think about this format again, so long. And yeah, so on that note, let's talk about Modern.
Okay. Yeah,
what are you playing?
Hollow One.
Hey.
I'm playing...
You played something else last night, though.
Oh, yeah, I played Grixis Shadow. I played Ben Friedman's Grixis Shadow list.
What did we learn?
What it taught me about Shadow and the Modern format is that Ben Friedman is a wizard who can win with bad decks. So Alex said something that I felt rang very true, which was that all your cards are very low impact. Like, aside from the creatures, basically, all your cards are very low impact and they all go dead very quickly. So actually, let me talk about it this way. I was going into it with the thought process of, A, is Shadow actually a playable deck? Is Grixis Shadow actually a playable deck that I might be interested in picking up? That I already own all the cards for, but I might be interested in playing in the next Modern PPTQ season. And B, if it is Faceless Looting a good card in it? Because people have been trying it out and adopting it, and I can see the appeal, but it's also a hard card for me to really get behind in like mid-range lists, which Shadow sort of still is.
Because playing Bedlam Reveler and Lingering Souls and have that innate synergy, right?
Yeah, well, it's all just like lists that don't have good answers to what are you doing with the cards you're discarding. Because I feel like Faceless Looting as a card is a card that demands the answer to the question of like, okay, well, what are you doing with the cards you're discarding? And Shadow's answer is, I mean, I guess I'm snapping them back, or like delving them to Gurmag Angler. If I'm being honest, what I'd rather do is like just discard lands, like discard cards I just don't want, which isn't very exciting. At that point, I'm not that into playing Faithless Looting, though I will circle back to that point in a minute. I feel like Mardu is like, oh, yeah, I have like Lingering Souls, which is still a card from the graveyard, and I've got Bedlam Reveler, and I have like cards like Blood Moon that are bad in multiples, and then I have the discarding lands line. So, like, Mardu has a reasonable answer. Then Hollow One is like, oh, I'm making incredibly good use of my recursive threats that I'm putting into the graveyard, and I want to discard cards from my Hollow Ones, and I'm delving cards away with Gurmag Angler. And because a lot of my cards are like high impact, or like a lot of my cards are recursive or are like individually high impact when cast, like a late game Faithless Looting is very powerful kind of thing. And it's like actually a big part of the late game of the deck. And then Dredge is kind of like, its answer to the first question is, why do I have cards in my hand in the first place?
Get these things in the bin.
So I do feel like my willingness to put Faithless Looting into a deck is based on its answer to the question of like what you're doing with the cards you're discarding. I do think there's a secondary question, which is how much do you value like 3 mana, draw 2, discard 2? Because Faithless Looting, that is something I think people like underplay. Whenever people say like, oh, Faithless Looting always leaves you down a card, and I'm like, well, only if you don't think 3 mana, draw 2, discard 2 is a card.
Right.
Like if that is worth a card to you, like later on in the game, then you're not down a card. You drew 3 cards, and then discarded 2 cards, and one of the cards that you drew, but you weren't allowed to discard it, was like 3 mana, draw 2, discard 2.
For sure.
So like, I don't know. Either way, I played Faithless Looting in Grixis Shadow, and all I did with it was discard lands that I didn't want. And while that is sort of powerful, because Shadow's worst problems are always that the games where you flooded were so bad because your individual cards aren't that high impact and cannot carry a game on their own. That flooding was atrocious. But because, you know what I said before, where Alex said that like so many of your cards are so low impact and they go dead so quickly. That's another reason why Faithless Looting is actually kind of interesting in the deck, because all your cards are quite low impact and they go dead very quickly. So you're interested in discarding them to Faithless Looting because they're dead cards now, because it's turn 5 and you're at 3 life and you can't cast this Dismember or whatever.
Or you're playing a million Stubborn Denial in a matchup that doesn't require Stubborn Denial.
Yeah, good old Stubborn Denial. The card is insanely powerful when it's powerful. It's just I don't think that time is... like, I think it's so polarized right now. By the way, basically, I had games where my opponent literally did nothing. Where I thought seized 2 cards out of their hand, and then they just drew lands. And I felt like if they had drawn 1 more live card, I would be dead.
It's pretty. It's a pretty tight
and that
line,
was
for
I
sure.
won those games, but that was obscene. I was sitting there being like, man, if they draw 1 good card, I'm just gonna die.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
For sure.
Why am I playing this deck if I can't if I can't feel insanely ahead in these games?
I mean, I don't know. There's just going back to the Stubborn Denial kind of quote unquote problem. The deck just requires this. I mean, I don't know. How many is he playing? 3 in Ben's
3
list?
in the main, 1 in the board.
Right.
It does require things to go right. It requires you need to have like hand disruption early, and then a threat kind of medium, and then a Stubborn Denial a bit later.
Yeah, I mean, it needs these cards to be in the 60 because there are so many matchups where they're so important that you see this card. And then there's so many matchups where you just don't want to see this card at all, and it's the first thing that you're pulling out when it comes to sideboarding. And I mean, I guess that's a standard mid-range deck kind of conundrum, and I guess you have Faithless Looting to deal with that. But I feel like it's so polarizing, and Modern is just such an unforgiving format currently for these kinds of lines.
I do think it's a recent development.
Sure, that's my point. Like current Modern is my that's
like basically, point. I mean, basically, it's since Humans became a very good deck,
right?
Is the thing. Because before that point, even the creature decks had targets for your Stubborn Denials because they were playing Collected Companies and Court of Callings.
Right.
So you drew a Summon Denial and you were like, well, this isn't huge, super high impact now, but if I do get control of the board, this is going to stop me from losing it again. Mm-hmm. And so there definitely was use for it before, and there still is, obviously. But now someone goes like, Horizon Canopy Aether Vial, and you go, oh,
no dear.
Well, they were on the play, and now this is like just a dead card, and any more I draw are just like actually dead. Like they have no targets. And so I just feel like the deck is so polarized. If I knew I was going to play against exclusively Tron and like combo, I would probably play Grixis Shadow. But without the ability to make that claim, I feel like it's so poor against so much of what people are doing that, I don't know, you need to be a wizard, I think, to make it a good deck.
Yeah, and the other fair decks are around. So let's talk about the Mardu Pyro matchup it's a Lingering Souls deck. That's pretty poor for you.
Lingering Souls and Young Pyromancer are both problematic cards.
Absolutely. And then how's the Jeskai matchup go? They play 4 paths.
How else have I played it? Yeah, I mean, so path decks were never necessarily the problem. Lingering Souls is actually a much bigger issue than
for sure. No. I'm very confident about the Mardu Pyro call and how that matchup goes. I mean, we've played it, but I guess I'm sort of asking the question with the Jeskai one. It sort of looks like it might be poor, but I don't really know.
I think Jeskai's probably an okay matchup. I think it depends on how they're built. It used to be that you struggled against the ones that played lots of lightning bolts and lightning helixes and played like spell quellers.
Right.
Because they were a control deck, you were incentivized to do a lot of damage to your own life total in order to make your shadows big. But because they were also like an 8 lightning bolt deck, they could then kill you very quickly out of nowhere.
Just like Foggy with a snap and, bolt, snap, bolt, and tap, helix you or something.
Exactly. You had lots of lines like that, which... So they got to play, basically they got to play Burn, but whereas against Burn, you can let them do a bunch of the damage. Jeskai just wouldn't, because they didn't need to.
For sure.
They would eventually establish a control of the game state, so you had to do things faster. These variants, depends how many, how aggressive they can get with their Bolt, Snap, Bolt, basically.
Right.
Playing Teferi is probably a net negative against Shadow, because... It's much harder to resolve through Thought Seizes and Summon Denials compared to Spell Queller.
Well, they play those in the board usually. A lot of the decks have. I'm just looking at them. A lot of them are running the Secure the Wastes, which is kind of problematic.
Secure the Waste sounds miserable for Shadow.
Yeah, that's
I guess
a problem.
Hopefully by the time it's actually a threatening card, they're either dead, you have a Battle Rage, or you have a stub.
Or they don't have the path for your Battle Rage or something stupid. But there's also just
if they're casting Secure the Wastes, you're hoping that they're doing it for all their mana. If they have Secure the Wastes and Path and also a Supreme Verdict, then you're okay, cool.
You have this one.
They had all the cards.
So there's a lot of velocity in them. They're generally favouring Opt over Serum Visions, which is really interesting. You're seeing a kind of split on the Wraths very often between Supreme Verdict and Wrath of God.
That makes sense because of humans.
Yeah, for the Meddling Mage. There's a lot of Dominaria cards in these decks. I mean, obviously we just touched on Teferi, which is superseding Jace in a lot of these lists, and people, a lot of people are sort of 1-1 split on these, but others are just saying, no, Teferi's just better, so I'm going to play a few copies of that. But then there's also a Lyra. There's Lyras in the sideboard, Damping Spheres. Yeah, well, because Baneslayer Angel has seen a lot of play, and I think that they're basically...
Lyra... when has Baneslayer Angel seen that much play in Modern?
I'm really not sure. I don't know if it's a kind of post-board humans call when they bring out their Reflector Mages. I don't understand, but it's there, and I guess that, your... A 1-1 split of Lyra and Baneslayer makes a whole lot more sense than 2 Lyras or 2 Baneslayers, but it's there and it's getting results.
This confuses me very much. I do not think that Baneslayer is a particularly strong. I feel like there's better things to do in Modern, but I guess it is absurd against Burn if you get to 5 mana and get to cast it.
Sure, it's definitely good there.
I guess it's also great against Hollow One.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like humans, if they don't know what's going on, or they don't say that you're going to do it, or maybe it's just poor, even then, they need to cut their Reflector Mages. And at that point, the Lyra or the Baneslayer Angel Lyra become
I can see it being
really
good against humans, actually. The more I look at good decks, the more I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see it being good against humans.
Works, you know?
I can see it. Seems great against Hollow One. Mm-hmm. Seems good against Affinity.
Yep. Yeah. It's there, and it's making waves. And I don't know how I feel about Jeskai overall as a choice. It's certainly not something that I'll be taking into this season of PPTQs, at least not at this juncture. We'll see. But it's another fair deck that's making waves, between that, Grixis Shadow and Mardu Pyro. I think those are the, I'm not going to get into a debate on what the word fair means, but those are the kind of major fair decks that are popping up at the moment. I guess Blue-White Control is still kind of in the picture, but it's... I
mean, Blue-White Control is still pretty in the picture, I think.
Oh, let's talk about Blue-White Control, actually. The reason I want to talk about it is because this deck's playing... this is Miracles now, right? And you're playing... for Terminus in some instances.
I don't think that's necessarily true of like every Blue-Eye Control deck.
Sure.
Like there have been some good results with those sorts of things, but I think that a lot of Blue-Eye Control decks are just like more traditional Blue-Eye Control.
Well, I don't know, like as this, in the last few weeks, it's really been the Terminus ones that have been getting the results. I think that that's kind of been a slow shift, and we're now at a point where, as I've said, pretty much for the month of June, probably, so not too long, but all the results that have been coming out in this time are the Terminus deck, which isn't necessarily Miracles, but, it's playing Terminus. Some of them playing Entreat the Angels as well. It's really interesting.
I mean, we know Terminus is a very powerful card.
For sure. Yeah. You and I play a lot of Legacy.
And I mean, obviously, Legacy it has a supporting cast that give it a very strong, powerful backing. But, I mean, you have Jace now.
Yeah, they're just playing a lot of Jace. These lists are, running up to kind of 3 Jaces, I think, and a few Fairies as well. Just a lot of big, heavy-hitting haymakers. And some weird stuff to kind of smooth everything out. Like they're playing a lot of Think Twice. Well, not a lot, but it's usually a couple in lists. Obviously, you've got your Search for Escanta, which is still there, and you're still running some number of Supreme Verdict and Wrath of God. So I don't know. I think that a lot of the big outside of Tron, the big haymakers in the format are creature based. You look at humans. You look at Hollow One's it's creature based, obviously, but it's a kind of...
Also, Hollow One is a deck you definitely want Terminus against as opposed to Supreme Verdict. Or
absolutely. And then, outside of that, Affinity still hates Wraths, and it's really interesting.
Instant speed Wraths you get with your Opt.
That's amazing. Oh, man. I hadn't really thought about that. So what, you got Opt, Jace, obviously, Dum.
Jace doesn't let you instant speed it.
No, I'm just thinking about setups, Search for Escantas.
I mean, Opt doesn't really set up Terminus.
No, but it's interesting. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, you can use it to instant speed it, but it doesn't set it up. It doesn't set up Terminus at all.
But I was thinking about a combination of like Serum Visions and Opt, maybe where, you kind of put it there and then do it on their turn or something like that, but they're not even running Serum Visions because... one's on about Serum Visions anymore.
Some of the lists I'm seeing do run Serum Visions.
Okay, cool. So you run a combination, or is it a choice?
I see. I'm looking at a list right now that's like 4 from like that's running 4 Opt 3 Serum Visions.
Okay, cool. That's quite a lot of setup there. That's interesting.
I'm seeing a list from the 5 Oda League that's running 3 Serum Visions. It's also running a Deprive.
So. This is all quite interesting, though. I don't have a lot of experience with it, and I don't know if anyone in the team is looking to pick this up. But I'm intrigued to kind of play a bunch against it. I don't
know. I do think that, as you say, the kind of fair pillars right now, and this is kind of all coming towards a grand hypothesis that I have about Modern right now, but we'll get there in a moment. The fair pillars right now, I think, are like I guess it depends on whether or not you classify fair as like
I don't want to do that too much. Like is burn fair?
Necessarily not aggressive. Yeah, like burn obviously is a difficult one to classify, but I don't know. To me, the fair decks that are good right now are like humans, blue-white / Jeskai control, Mardu mid-range, and depending on how you classify it, like Hollow One / Affinity.
Yeah.
And then sort of Shadow.
Yeah. It's all a bit tough. I think what we've done there is say I don't know. That's modern. So after your little experiment with Grixis Shadow last night, you're back on the Hollow Boys train?
Yeah, Hollow One's great. So Hollow One encapsulates everything about what I want to do in Modern, which generally... And Hollow One, I think, is like only semi a fair deck, and probably
I was going to say, I don't...
Then.
When you put that in the list, I didn't want to contend it because I don't want to have that debate right now, but...
Sure, let's just think it's not, because it probably isn't.
Sure.
But, Hollow One does everything I want to do in the Modern format, which is... so everyone talks about Modern, and they talk about how it's a format ruled by sideboard cards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the narrative about Modern for a very long time, was...
You just draw your rip, and then they're bad, and
draw your Rest in Peace, draw your Stony Silence, draw your Surgical Extraction, draw your powerful sideboard card that beats what your opponent's strategy is doing, because the power of the sideboard cards was so high, and the format was so wide that, you kind of just... sometimes it was just, I didn't bring my sideboard hate for this strategy today because I didn't expect to see it, and now I'm going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because also the strategies were so powerful that you needed very specific answers to beat a lot of them. I don't think that last bit has changed that much. Although some of the powerful strategies, like... what I think is interesting, actually, is some of the powerful strategies, like Mardu midrange and humans, have... While they look like normal versions of the decks. Like, Mardu midrange looks a bit like Jund, and humans looks a bit like Zoo. But both of them are both better at and worse at fighting against specific hate cards than those other decks were, I think.
Okay.
Humans obviously has far more power against hate cards than Zoo did, but it gets way more hosed by something like Torpor Orb than any Zoo deck ever has been.
Sure, I see what you mean.
People are talking about
getting
Honor Guard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like, humans relies almost entirely on Enter the Battlefield's triggers, and there are a couple of cards in Magic that shut those down, and if one of those is on the battlefield, it's actually really hard for humans to win. Which is really weird, because you look at it and it looks like a Zoo deck. Like, it's a tribal Zoo deck, and all the creatures do things, but normally those sorts of decks aren't that prone to being hated out by anything other than Wrath of God.
Yeah, there's people talking about getting getting Merfolk Trickstered. I don't like, this is kind of unrelated. I'm just like laughing at these weird new dorky creatures that are just wailing on humans, and people's phantasmal images are getting Merfolk Trickstered. It's really funny.
That's so good. I want to do that. I definitely want to do that. Except
I mean, you'd have to play Merfolk
Trickster.
Exactly. You don't want to do that.
I want to play Merfolk Trickster.
Right.
But yeah, okay. But so humans is more hated on by weird specific sideboard cards than I feel any Zoo deck has in the past. Mardu, so Jund has always been a deck that uses its graveyard to some degree. Never that much, but Kolaghan's Command, allowing you to kind of get creatures back, and Tarmogoyf obviously cares about graveyard.
Yeah, I was going to say, making Tarmogoyf's 0-1s against the Rip decks was always
yeah, it was always kind of bad, but Rip was never the way you beat Jund, right? Whereas Mardu, I've put Leyline of the Void into play on turn 0, and it felt like the deck did nothing.
Yeah, it can be pretty bad. Like, your Bedlam Revelers are essentially uncastable.
Your Bedlam Revelers are become one mana more expensive than Gurmag Angler.
Yep.
And not in the way that they normally are. Your Lingering Souls is just 3 mana, make 2 1/1s. Your Faceless Looting is just 1 mana, draw 2, discard 2. You don't get to do anything with the discarded cards. It felt like I just turned off most of what the deck was doing. I'm sure that there are draws out of Mardu that do beat
they usually
Resolved Leyline.
I will say what they are, actually, because in my experience, they are you play a Pyromancer, and then you play a bunch of stuff, and you just make 1/1s. And that has to be good enough. And if you're playing against a deck that's playing Leyline against you or Rip, and that strategy isn't good, you can't really do anything else. But that's basically how you're winning. You're just riding a Pyro. If you can't use your graveyard.
So it feels like where Jund would be like, okay, you played Rip. Well, that turns off a couple of my cards.
I'll just Lily you or something.
I'll just Lily you. I'll just resolve a Bob. Whatever. I'll do my other thing that generates advantage. I feel like Mardu relies on its graveyard so much more than Jund did, to a point where, like, Graveyard Hate, like Rest in Peace or Leyline, is so much more punishing against it. So while Mardu is traditionally the kind of deck that isn't that easy to attack in the way that modern decks like to attack things by, slamming a Haymaker sideboard card out, like, into their deck. I feel like while it is a mid-range deck that traditionally is hard to do that to, it actually isn't that hard to do that to, because Graveyard Hate is so much more effective against it than it has been in the past. So I feel like right now a lot of modern decks are weirdly more susceptible to, like, the big Haymaker sideboard cards than they have been previously. With the exception of Tron, because everyone's sideboard cards for Tron are bad.
Yep.
And that's part of why Tron is just always good. Sure. And, like, I guess Blue-White and Jeskai Control, because those have still actually remained... They just added Teferi. They haven't shifted, like, on a huge axis into a very different style of deck, like Jund.
Yeah, like the card choices
Jund is still a deck, but shifting it into Mardu is very different.
Yeah, the card choices are different. So, like, we talked about Opt and Serum Visions and how there's maybe a shift there. And I think that's recent, but a more kind of last few months shift has been Remand totally exiting the format and, Logic not pretty much establishing itself as a full-on modern staple. And, all these kind of choices.
I wouldn't say Remand left for Logic Not. I would say that Mana Leak left for Logic Not.
Okay, yeah, sure. For sure.
Remand was always... So Remand left the format... So Remand hasn't left the format because Storm still plays it.
Yeah.
But outside of Storm, Remand left the format when Twin left the format.
Right.
When you stopped having a power... I guess it still shows up in some Scapeshift decks as well. But basically, and you should see where this is going... Remand requires you to be able to, like, after you cast a Remand, untap and kill your opponent. Or do something incredibly powerful that makes it so that you just bouncing the spell back to their hand to buy you time was actually meaningful. Whereas, like, Remand in Jeskai, like, Control doesn't make any sense. You're going to Remand their thing, and then you're going to pass the turn. And then they're going to try and play their thing again. And you're going to have to counter it again.
Yeah.
So Remand doesn't really make sense there when you can play something like originally Mana Leak, because people were like, oh, this card's just good, and then people were kind of like, oh wait, no, this card's just bad. Why are we playing this card? And then eventually people have realized that actually Logic Knot's just really good. Like, you can just play that card, and it's better than Mana Leak in almost all situations.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is just, the decks are still around. They're making different card choices here and there, but, they're always in the mix.
Yeah. Well, what I mean more is that, like, these decks haven't shifted, haven't had a big paradigm shift like several of the other decks have. They haven't come out of whole cloth. I guess Humans hasn't really come out of whole cloth exactly. Like, Humans is an evolution to me of decks like Merfolk and Zoo. And in some ways, Death and Taxes. I feel like it's a conglomeration of all of these styles of decks. But it's definitely a refinement of them, based upon the release of the second 5-color tribal land, and the release of a lot of human, like, synergies recently, and all these things kind of creating a perfect storm where suddenly you have enough tribal synergies and payoffs to make you actually want to run this tribe, and the tribe is kind of incredibly wide and absurd.
Yeah.
And all the cards in it do something. Like, Merfolk just plays terrible cards because they're Merfolk. Humans gets to play good cards that are also humans.
Also, because of the pool of cards that are at their disposal, because of how many humans there are in Magic the Gathering, the deck has managed to kind of shift gears over the last few months. And, we're seeing a shift away from the Kisig Malcontent style. People are playing Restoration Angel, cutting on their Thalias. Obviously, Restoration Angel isn't a human, but it's got a lot. There's a lot of ETB triggers.
We know how we talked about Torpor Orb turns off the deck. But when Torpor Orb isn't in play, Restoration Angel is really good with all the cards that Torpor Orb turns off.
Exactly, and it just compared to we use Merfolk as a parallel here, and I think it's a good one here. There's just so much. There's such an ability for you to sort of change around what you're doing, and you're never going to shift away from the Noble Hierarchs, the Champion of the Parish. I'd say the Mantis Riders. But there's all this other stuff that you can kind of tweak the numbers on, move things around. You think like, Meddling Mage maybe isn't, this might not be a Meddling Mage weekend, so maybe I only play 3 Meddling Mage, and it sounds like really simple stuff, but you can shift things around. And then when it comes to sideboarding, there's just so much scope there in terms of, going back to what we were talking about, impactful modern sideboard cards. Guess what? A lot of hate bears and dumb stuff are also humans. And so you can just change your board accordingly based on that.
To be fair, a lot of the sideboard cards they play aren't actually humans. They're like spirits and things.
Sure.
They play like Katakis and Selfless Spirits.
Mm-hmm, but they're also playing things like Sin Collectors and Statocasters. And okay, you're right. There's like Rex Sages and the like, but there's also the Aura Champions of the world,
Oh, yeah, no. So while I will definitely agree that them having access... So their sideboarding is better than a traditional tribal deck, but worse than most other decks, I would say.
Okay.
They have access to a better sideboard than Merfolk, for example, or Zoo, because they get to call on the power of, every color of human that has been printed over the past, 10 years of Magic, if not more. And then, because of Ether Vial and because they do play white, they can call on white creatures from Magic as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't play colored spells in their deck, in their sideboard, because they play Unclaimed Territory and Cavern of Souls and Ancient Ziggurat.
Which is how you end up with just gut shots and dismembers and the like.
Yeah. So, if they could play like a Fatal Push or a Path, if they felt comfortable playing Path to Exile, you definitely see that in sideboards ahead of Dismember, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that the humans deck can support Path to Exile, so they can't and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So while they do have better sideboard options than Merfolk, I still think they have worse sideboard options than other decks that can play spells.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially given that lots of the powerful sideboard cards that you see in Modern are not creatures. That said, Human still does a great job with its sideboard, and they still manages to have very impactful, powerful things to do, because it is a creature deck, and you don't actually want that many non-creatures in your deck post-sideboard. But I still think that their options are more limited than, they might not want to play that many non-creature spells, but they probably still want to play a few more than they actually are able to because of their mana.
I think it's still swing, like a lot of them are still trying to swing things like Stony Silence, which arguably... you potentially can. One card, again, speaking about weird, recently printed humans that have been showing up, but a card that I've seen show up quite a bit is Heron's Grace Champion.
Ooh.
As a one-of.
That boy never made any impact in Standard,
sure.
But...
in mains and sideboards. So for anyone who never saw this Eldritch Moon card, I think it's Eldritch Moon. Yeah, it's Eldritch Moon. 2 green and a white... 3/3 human knight with flash and lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, other humans you control get +1/+1 and gain lifelink until end of turn. This is
so this card's actually quite powerful. And on rate, it does a lot of things
for sure. And in the mirror, I imagine that this is bonkers.
Any creature matchup or burn, this sounds absurd. And against any other deck where the lifelink is maybe not necessarily as powerful, getting a +1/+1 to your team is still very good in humans.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that card never got a chance to shine in Standard because it shared a Standard with Collected Company for the entire time it was there.
Yep.
I could play this 4-mana instant speed pump effect in my creature deck. Ooh, or I could play this absurd magic card.
Heron's Grace Champion is so cool though. Like the game day promo looked great too. Anyway,
that's true.
That's making waves in Modern.
But yeah, okay. So Grand, Modern, Thesis things. These are the fair decks of the format, and then not Grand, Modern, Thesis. Hollow One things. Grand, Modern, Thesis things later.
Okay.
Hollow One things. Hollow One is doing what I want to be doing in Magic, or in Modern, which is... Okay, so I was coming at this from the sideboard angle. Alright, we talked about sideboards, and how Modern is a format that has been defined by sideboarding strategies for a long time. This remains to be true. However, I still maintain that the best sideboard strategy in Modern does not involve any actual individual card, and is instead something that I like to call just kill 'em. So, what's the best sideboard strategy against Storm? I don't know, just kill 'em. What's the best sideboard strategy, Dan, against Time Walks? Just kill 'em. What's the best sideboard strategy against Jeskai aggro? Just kill 'em, Dan. just kill 'em. Just make him dead.
Yep.
They're doing their thing. I don't know. Make 2 4/4s on turn 1. Make you dead. Hollow One does have bad matchups, and actually, like, Storm is quite a bad matchup, as I just said. So despite me talking about just killing them, but the games I've won have been games where I just killed them.
That's usually how it goes.
So Hollow One is fundamentally, like, kind of unfairly aggressive, and ignoring the Burning Inquiry stuff, I've been keeping track of my matches. Over 45 matches, I have mana screwed my opponent with Burning Inquiry twice.
Okay. Interesting.
I do not think it is a part of the deck. It's just not an important part to take into account.
It's not him to Torak, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
But Hollow One fundamentally is like this unfair, like, recursive aggro deck that gets to do things really, really fast and quickly, and its floor is way higher than anybody thinks it is. Not anybody, but that a lot of people think it is. And it's a lot less random than people think it is. And it's just like a very powerful deck. It feels, to me, coming back to Modern after a long break and starting to play Hollow One, it felt like a fundamental paradigm shift in the format.
Right.
And everything was now more powerful than it had been previously. And part of that was just how much pressure Hollow One put you under and how much it asked of you to just not die to its good draws.
Right.
So all of that is true. And then, in my bad matchups, of which there are several, I don't want my plan to be, I'm going to draw my good sideboard card. I want my plan to be, well, my plan A is making them dead.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make them dead.
Plan doesn't change.
Yeah. And so I don't mind having cards that help out with disrupting them while I make them dead, but I still kind of want my primary plan in Modern to just be making them dead, because I feel it's too wide of a format to, like, mess around with things that are not making them dead.
I also feel like that's just a much better mulligan strategy. Like, oh, where's my Stony Silence? More just like, oh, does this hand kill them?
Dead?
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, whereas, like, you sit down and your opponent can be doing anything, and I feel, you get to the really weird decks of Modern, and you're never going to be able to cover all of them. Try as Thoughtseiz's might, it just can't do that. And I just want to make him dead.
So you're playing Hollow One.
So I'm playing Hollow One, because Hollow One is really good at making people dead. I'm playing Hollow One or Burn, depending on cards and how I feel, because I don't even think Burn's that bad of a choice right now.
Agreed.
Because it also has the plan of make him dead.
Which you've established is where you want to be.
Yeah. Tron is the actual deck that makes me want to have this plan, by the way.
Yes.
Like, every other deck exists and wanders around, but Tron is the deck where everyone says they have a sideboard card for it, but every Tron player I talk to is like, I
don't care.
People play sideboard cards against me all the time, and then I beat them.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, Damping Sphere, fine.
Blood Moon, sure.
Like, all of these things that people do against Tron just fundamentally aren't as good against Tron as they want them to be. And that's because the thing is that what Tron is actually doing is it's saying, you have to be the beatdown, because the things I'm going to do are going to give me so much inevitability this game. Like, I am going to play so much more powerful cards than you even have in your deck, like way earlier than most people are prepared for, and then you're going to just die. And the only way to stop that is for me to die. So Tron just asks you to be an efficient beatdown deck. That is the actual good sideboard strategy against Tron, is just be a good beatdown.
I think the word efficient there is extremely important.
Yeah.
So, because everyone is the beatdown against Tron, right? Like, in terms of role occupation in the in the matchup, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that obviously everybody knows that, but at the same time, if your deck's just thoroughly incapable of killing them in that time frame, then you're going to die.
That said, I think that Blue-White Control has gotten better since their decision to adopt like Field of Ruin.
Mm-hmm.
Like apparently Blue-White Control pilots, like competent ones, are getting to reasonable win rates against Tron.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting, because Blue-White Control isn't normally a very good beatdown deck. But I can also see how Jace would help them a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Jace gives you a lot more scope to both have enough resources to keep up with what Tron's doing, especially if you have catch-all answers like Cryptic Command and Logic Knot, and allows you to actually close out a game before your opponent just draws Ulamog and kills you.
Right.
Because you can just plus and then put the Ulamog on the bottom of their deck. But yeah, I just don't really want to play a deck in Modern that, isn't good at making my opponent dead. And my personal problem with Mardu Pyromancer is that I think it's really bad at making its opponent dead.
Yes,
your
agreed.
clocks don't come down very fast, and they're all making just like several 1/1s at once, but never that many 1/1s at once. Not like black-white tokens levels of 1/1s at once, just like fine levels of 1/1s at once. I said the phrase 1/1s at once a lot. It's starting to lose all meaning. But yeah. I don't think Mardu's necessarily a bad deck, but and people have told me that they are able to beat Tron. Like, it is a winnable matchup. You just have to be prepared.
I really disagree. I don't think that matchup is winnable at all.
I think that I think it fundamentally asks you to be a different deck than you are.
Absolutely. And I think that people who say that, okay, sure, maybe you've beaten it once or twice, but your matchup is terrible, and you're absolutely kidding yourself if you say otherwise. And let's just talk about this, because this has kind of been my struggle for this week with Mardu Pyro, is that I felt very much that, Modern as a whole, just sort of everything that we've talked about, has not shifted away. It's just everything that's happening in Modern is just so proactive and so fast and so kind of singular and linear in its game plans. And Mardu Pyro sort of occupies this space where it's like, oh, I'm Jund, and I'm sort of trying to keep up with all of this stuff. And I think I'm finally come around to like, oh no, I do think I do want to play this deck. And I think that, I'm just hyper aware of its weaknesses, and that's fine. That's something that I'm sort of taking on board at deck registration. But this whole week has been a bit of a struggle just to say like, well, do I want to play this fair? Is that what the format is about? And is that how you get success? And I think that, I'm not alone in that. I've spoken to a lot of, fellow Mardu Mancer pilots that are, in the same kind of conundrum. And I think, I was chatting to some folks, and we sort of came to the conclusion that there's a lot of powerful stuff that you're doing here. It doesn't kill them fast, though. That's kind of the problem. But if you're okay with that, then you can play this deck. But you need to be okay with that. And I don't think that it's necessarily a poor choice. I think it's, it's going to what we said earlier about the pillars of fair magic and everything. It's definitely one of them. And it's here and it's there. And
it's quite good against a lot of those fair decks that we talked about.
Yes, absolutely. The humans matchup is good.
It's good against Affinity.
Yep.
It's good against like the Jeskai control deck. I don't know about Blue-White. That sounds a bit harder because it's harder to block them out the game.
Yeah, Blue-White's a bit harder, from what I can tell. Burn's a pretty poor one, I imagine.
Yeah, I can imagine Burn being really bad because you don't have a clock, and having played a lot of Burn, the way you beat that deck is a clock. For sure. Hollow One seems... I don't know... So I've played a lot against Mardu Pyromancer as Hollow One. Let me pull up my notes.
Go on. I'm curious.
They're kind of funny. So originally I thought my matchup was excellent against Mardu Pyromancer.
Okay. Small sample?
Because I kept winning.
Right, sure. Okay.
So I mean, it's all small sample sizes really, because I've played 45 matches with the deck, but that's not that many. I think I played a few more that I didn't record as well, but whatever.
Sure.
Let me see. So I had a lot of good success early, and was like, yeah, wow, I won a lot on the draw. This matchup must be great. And then I played it again, and I lost, and it felt miserable. It felt like I couldn't win, and I was like, what's going on? What happened? So I went back and I looked through my notes, and here are some of the notes that I wrote for my early matches against Mardu Pyromancer. Boarded wrong. Totally failed to read opponent as Mardu despite clear signs. Won anyway. Deck carried, and I put 3 Hollow Ones into play by turn 2, game 2. This is after winning game 1 off because my opponent stumbled on mana. Lol, 3 hollow ones, turn 2, game 2.
These notes are so good.
There's a few more like that. Turns out, the reason I thought my matchup was good was because I was a luck sack.
You just drawing these absurd hands.
Yeah, who was just like killing my opponent really, really fast with like a ton of big threats that I got to play insanely early because the deck is unreasonable.
Right. Oh man.
And then like I played against it and he got to be on the play and like discard my hollow ones out of my hand.
That's what I was thinking. I think being on the play and being able to take, you know, the Goblin Laws or the Hollow Ones or whatever, I feel like you can't necessarily going to pick a hand apart, but you're going to slow it down enough that you can find a foothold in the game to establish some kind of control.
My opponent got to untap with a Pyromancer and then cast a Lingering Souls, and I looked at the board state and I was like, oh, well, I can't win. I guess maybe I can win if I draw a Lightning Bolt before he kills me, but maybe I don't, and then I'd die.
Yep.
I did have one game where my opponent Thoughtseize me. I had Street Wraith looting 2 hollow ones. Rest of the hand is irrelevant. That hand makes 2 4/4s on turn 1 with no randomness.
Yeah.
So he Thoughtseize me, and I'm like, oh man, I'm on the draw. So I'm like, oh man, he's gonna take my looting, or like. Because that's my only discards. That's my only draw and discard cards. So I'm like, it's going to take my looting. My hand's going to be rubbish now, and it's going to be really slow. This is terrible. He took my hollow one, one of them, and then he surgicaled it and took the other one out of my hand.
Oh.
Hey? And then he played a Liliana of the Veil. Oh, God. And I didn't really understand that choice, because that card's really bad against hollow one. Because we played Bloodghast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of this card. Yeah.
Flamewake Phoenix.
Well, yeah, Bloodghast's a really big one, though. Sure. One just keeps coming back. Phoenix, at least if you get rid of the big creature, then maybe we won't be able to...
So many little idiots. Veil is so bad.
Yeah. Veil is... and also, there are a bunch of cards I draw where I'm like, oh yes, please, let me put it in the graveyard.
I really...
if you're upticking Liliana the Veil and discarding, a real card, and I'm discarding a Bloodghast, then you're definitely losing.
This is so good. I don't hate it. I can never hate Liliana the Veil because of who I am as a person, but it's very poorly positioned at the moment. And Jerry had played Veils in his Vegas list, Jerry Thompson, after speaking to Reed Duke, who inevitably was going to play Liliana the Veil in his black mid-range modern deck. And after the tournament, Jerry was thinking, oh, I don't like these. And I was just like, well, I trust Reed and I like Lilies, so let's try it. And I really don't like the card. The one that I'm trying at the moment is Nahiri the Harbinger as a one of, sort of. So my Planeswalkers are Lily Last Hope and a Harbinger. And then...
See, that card's exciting to me because it gives you outs to problematic permanents like Rip and Leyline. You know how we talked about the deck doesn't really function that well underneath those?
Yep.
Well, Nahiri is both an excellent plan B under those kind of hate cards and a good way of getting rid of them.
And I've always wanted to play Nahiri with Lingering Souls. That sounds so great.
People did do that for a while. There was a modding midrange list that played her and Emrakul and Dark Confidant.
Yeah, Wayne played that.
And you got to play it if you had absurdly big balls.
Yeah. Because you could flip your Emrakul to the Dark Confidant, which, So
playing Emrakul and Dark Confidant in the same deck is actually the only way to get respect, if we're being honest with ourselves.
Exactly.
It is the only true man's Magic deck, is Bob and enormous CMC creatures.
Yeah.
I've seen a list
with Shotclads in the format.
Yes. I've seen a list with Bob, Grizzlebrand, and Entomb in it.
Wow.
You know what? That's sick.
Respect.
That's the best. That is how you get respect right there. Okay? So, don't at me about modern decks that are not playing Dark Confidant and creatures with a CMC less than 7.
Sure.
Okay? But alright. Yeah, I like Nahiri in modern Pyromancer
for sure.
Because I like the angles it gives the deck.
Mm-hmm. And only 2 Blood Moons, 3's excessive, and not playing this Ensnaring Bridge plan anymore. Not sure how I feel about that just now, but we're trying it. Do you have anything more to cover on modern? I was thinking we could go.
Glad you asked.
Yeah, sure.
Let's circle back round. I've been talking about this greater modern unifying theory thing I've got.
Right. Okay. All right. We've done Hollow One, but we'll get to do this now. Got it. Go ahead.
Hot take. may be wrong on this one, but I think it's an interesting point of view to talk about.
That's why it's hot. Right?
Modern is the narrowest that it has been possibly in its history outside of periods of extreme unhealthiness prior to a ban.
Ooh. Okay.
Like, the existence of decks like Humans and Hollow One
and Tron.
And Tron.
Yep.
And the power that a lot of like control decks like Jeskai and Blue White are getting makes it like puts so many restrictions on what it means for a modern deck to be able to be good that I actually think that an enormous number of what we would normally think of as like reasonable modern decks are just being totally pushed out of the format.
Okay.
And it's possible that I am viewing this as narrowing because my perception is that these are like modern decks that should be in the format. And it's possible the numbers won't carry this out because I haven't actually been like paying enough attention to the numbers. Mm-hmm. But to me, it feels like the number of viable decks in Modern, while still very large compared to most other formats, like, well, compared to Standard basically, because Legacy's always been like a very wide format as well. But I think compared to Modern Past, it feels to me like it's narrower. And the difference between the top and the next like level below it is smaller than it has, or is larger than it has been even. Mm-hmm. Because of the power of decks like Hollow One and Humans. People are talking about how the format's cardinal turn is kind of starting to shift towards like turn 3.5, which is obviously a meaningless statement. But I understand what they mean in that, like Hollow One has draws that kill you on turn 3, and Humans has draws where you're effectively dead on turn 3.
And Infect's so coming Tron. Back.
Yeah, and Infect's coming back. Good old Infect. Mm-hmm. God, that deck. And like Storm kills you on turn 3 in like it's not that uncommon.
Nope.
They'll do that.
They will. Happened to me last night. It was good fun.
Yeah. So I feel like the power level of Modern has fundamentally upgraded at some point. Among like the very, very good decks. And like so some point between when I last played it and now.
Yeah, I agree actually. It does, and as you say, like the restrictions that all of these insane things are placing on the format are really, really significant. And it sort of feels like, I'm not going to say that you could get away with playing nonsense a few months ago, but it's a lot less forgiving.
Yeah, that's my feeling. So my hot take on Modern right now is that it is a fundamentally narrower format than it has ever been outside of situations like pre-Ayavugin ban or pre-Treasure Cruise ban. Places where like there was deep unhealthiness in the format, and things were starting to kind of like, well, Ayavugin is the best example because it's that at that point in time, really there was only like 1 or 2 viable decks, and it was Eldrazi and something that beat Eldrazi. I think there were a couple of decks that were actually quite good at beating Eldrazi, but they weren't necessarily what we would think of as good Modern decks.
For sure.
But yeah, outside of that period of time, I think this might be the narrowest that Modern has been that I can remember, certainly. It's
really interesting. I think I really like this, what you're positing here.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's... I'm not even sure if it's bad. I don't think that Modern is necessarily suddenly unhealthy, and I'm not really calling for a ban on anything. And we haven't even talked about KCI, another incredibly powerful deck.
Yes.
That feels like another paradigm shift in the format where suddenly, this is what combo decks are going to look like now.
Yeah.
Like if this...
And this is what you need to be able to beat, and this is... Yeah.
Yeah. If KCI remains a force in the format, which obviously... I'm not going to talk about whether or not it should be banned. I don't necessarily think I have an interesting point of view on that. I haven't really played with or against the deck nearly enough to know. And also, I don't work at Wizards. But, KCI is not another deck that has risen to prominence where suddenly you're like, oh man, okay, well... This is the speed and resiliency that we're going to see out of combo decks in this format. Like KCI reminds me of Legacy Storm.
Yes. No, I agree. It
doesn't play Duress and Cabal Therapy. It plays Engineered Explosives. And it doesn't play like Past in Flames alongside Infernal Shooter. It plays Infernal Shooter and like Lion's Eye Diamond and that kind of whole package, which you'll understand my point, but it plays... it just plays like Scrap Trawler and like a bunch of eggs and things like that, and Croc Clan Ironworks itself. It's very resilient and it's very good at recurring all the things that it's doing. And And that kind of reminds me of a lot of bits of Legacy Storm where, it has cards that allow it to beat a lot of hate cards for it. And it has access to this kind of sort of grindy game plan almost, where it can just kind of like keep playing through what its opponent's doing, and it can just run its opponent out of answers and resources, and then kill them.
Yeah. No, I like this parallel. Although, like, obviously the individual card parallels don't work. That's not the point at all. It's the overall kind of strategy and the way that it interacts with how people try to interact with it and how people try to beat it.
Yeah, that's kind of my feeling about it. And I think that, like, if KCI remains in the format, it fundamentally shifts what kind of place Modern is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we're approaching a space where, you brought, like, your kind of weird fun deck.
Yep. Vampire Tribal, that's cute. Vampire
Tribal.
Like,
I've seen that being played at GPs, and it was getting wins, but I think that once you get to a point where, like, KCI is the premier combo deck in your format, well, okay, you probably can't play that deck anymore.
Sure.
You will just die.
It's also really interesting how things like, talking about combo decks, like, Titan Shift is just getting bullied out of the format right now because the format is just not about Titan Shift. And a few months ago, it almost certainly was, but this combo deck is just way too slow.
Yeah, like when people can go, okay, well, on turn 3...
Oh, you're doing that? Well, I'm playing Storm.
Like, yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, I'm playing Storm, or my turn 2 was to play a Mind Stone, and your turn 2 was to play a Farseek. And then, so we both played ramp spells on turn 2. But then I'm going to untap and immediately kill you. And you're going to untap and play another ramp spell. Like, Valakut always got by. Or, well, not got by, but Valakut got a lot of its equity, just all the Valakut decks. But Titan Shift especially got a lot of its equity from the fact that a lot of Modern was kind of these mid-range decks that didn't have a very good beatdown plan.
Correct.
So you kind of got to beat up on Jund because...
Oh, you beat up on Jund. Definitely.
Yeah, because eventually, like, you're just going to draw something that kills them, and you'll have 7 lands in play, and then they'll die.
You need to have, like, double Goyf draws and have them stumble.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like Thoughtseize double Goyf or something.
And then against other decks, you kind of had the reasonable plan of, like, okay, well, what if I just turn for them? Like, what if I'm on the play and I just turn for them? Like, maybe they'll just die to that. Which isn't a terrible plan. But right now it kind of is, because if I'm on the play and I just turn for them, well, there's a reasonable chance that they'll turn 3 you.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, if you're both just goldfishing past each other, and your fastest goldfish is turn 4, well, some of these guys can goldfish on turn 2.
Yeah. And
not very commonly. But turn 3 is not uncommon.
Yeah, and if you're not interacting with, the humans deck in any kind of reasonable fashion, which if you are going really, really fast, you're probably not out of that deck, then... they're just going to beat you up.
Even if you are interacting with the humans deck, they have a lot of ways to beat around combo decks.
Yeah,
like humans Mage, also shift things because Merfolk was always kind of medium against combo decks, right? It was a bit better because it got to play counter magic, but it was always kind of just okay. Whereas like Zoo was generally pretty bad against combo decks because you just really weren't fast enough. There's a reason why there aren't any good Zoo lists in Legacy.
Yes.
It's because Storm and Show and Tell just make you cry. Humans is kind of different because Humans is actually very good against Storm. Humans gets to go, oh, okay. Oh, you're playing spell-based combo. Well, I have a Duress that's also a 1-2 flyer that obviously will then become a 2-3 flyer.
Yep.
And I have this, like, main deck hate piece that pumps my other creature.
Putting the Duress off a Vial as well is just like, oof, what? How is this?
So Humans has all these interactive pieces. So then again, that pushes the format in another direction where, okay, well, you got a nice combo deck there. Oh, that's all right, but, like Ad Nauseam, for example, I think is fairly unplayable because it has such a bad Humans matchup.
Yeah, it's just way too slow.
Ad Nauseam can turn 3 people, but not nearly as commonly as some of these other decks can.
Sure.
And also, you're really, like, Humans just goes, okay, game 1, they go, Meddling Mage on Ad Nauseam. And the Ad Nauseam lists that I was playing before Humans existed lose the game immediately.
Yep.
So people have started to play, like, okay, an Echoing Truth in the main deck. Or, other weird ways to be able to beat Humans.
They're 4 Meddling Mages. Oof.
I mean, like, if you're just echoing truth, like, one meddling mage on their end step, and some people...
No, for sure. I'm just thinking about, like, the likelihood of you having it while they're just beating the crap out of you. It's... Ugh.
I mean, absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, you're playing way more filtering than they are, but still, like, I think it's a poor plan. I think it's like,
we're both on board with that, like...
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, well, my deck isn't very good against this deck. In fact, it gets slaughtered alive by it. But... I guess I'll put in this one card that I hope to see. Like, you're kind of just trying to mise the matchup, I think. Which maybe isn't a terrible approach, depending on how much of the metagame you expect to be that deck.
But that might just not be where you want to be, personally. And
yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing is that if the premier aggro deck is actually good against the combo decks, that shifts a lot of the paradigm of how the format works.
Yeah. Yep. No, you're
because
right.
the combo decks can't expect to beat the aggro decks unless they are themselves... Even, like, they get under the aggro deck's disruption. And, like, that's insane. The aggro decks are the police for the combo decks?
Yeah, it's really weird.
That's not how it normally works.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just, obviously it's disruptive
I guess
aggro.
It does
that's
but, like,
the kind of hot buzzword that's getting used for all these aggro decks is disruptive aggro, so that's why this happens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing, is that disruptive aggro decks... Like Delver is a disruptive aggro deck, and that deck is actually pretty good against some of the combo decks of Legacy. So
and that's
I definitely understand
and,
why
like,
humans
Zoo in Legacy, which is what you said earlier, and obviously, it's not the same thing at all.
Zoo used to be a good deck in Legacy.
Sure, no doubt, but it's yeah,
and you can't play it anymore.
Absolutely
because,
not.
Like, man, like you're playing a Wild Nacatl?
Okay,
Dark Ritual.
That's fine.
Yeah, your opponent's one drop is a tomb and a petal and a show and tell. Buddy, what are you doing?
Yep, you're probably going to put in a, I don't know, what does it play? What does Legacy Zoo play?
I literally have no idea. I know they used to play Wild Nacatl. I'm assuming they probably played Knight of the Reliquary or something, because that card's just too good.
So you put Knight of the Reliquary, and then you get Emrakul.
To be fair, if you have a Caracas, that actually does beat Emrakul, because you could put in Knight of the Reliquary, and then you untap, and you sack a land, and you go and get a Caracas, and you bounce the Emrakul back to their hand.
Oh, true that.
It don't beat Omniscience, and it don't beat Grizzlebrand. Yes, he's a legendary creature. No, you don't count as beating it if they drew 7 cards.
No, we're not going to go over this again.
But yeah, so that's my takeaway from Modern at the moment. Is I feel like it's narrowing because I feel like the decks that are very good are so much better than everything else.
Yep, I mean, I agree. I don't know, it's an interesting time. It's certainly different to the last time that we were attacking Modern, which I don't think we were recording this podcast at the time. But there was that whole notion of, there's that big wide world out there, and we need to be able to kind of either find a way to take it on or be very, very comfortable in the spots where we can't, because we simply can't cover everything. And you just have to saddle up when you get faced with those matchups, and you just think, well, okay, I only have 15 cards on my sideboard and that's it. Whereas we're in a world that's kind of different now, as you say, it's a lot more narrow, and you can be a bit more focused, or at least have a bit more kind of, feel like you've got a bit more coverage, I think, out of your 75. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do think that's true, because the very, very good decks are narrower, but it's also true because the very, very good decks, generally, are very, very good at having the sideboard plan of make them dead.
Yeah.
Like, Humans is very good at its sideboard plan of, what are you doing? I don't know, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah. Oh, well, what do you got in your hand there?
Most of the decks...
Oh, okay, I'll take that. Cool.
Oh, what do you got? Oh, man, I do not know. I'm going to take that. Oh, you're playing, like, Mono Green Devotion?
Sure.
Okay, well, if you resolve that Genesis Wave, I probably do die.
So, I guess we'll take that.
I played this 1-mana 1/1 on turn 1, but now it's a 9/9, so you're just going to be dead. Sorry.
Bye-bye. Fun.
So yeah, that is my general thoughts on Modern as a format. I think it's a very interesting time for the format, and I feel like a lot of the format's identity is going to be defined by what happens over the next couple of years.
It's really interesting. I think we're going to be doing a whole bunch more discovery over the next couple of weeks. I mean, we've got Nationals coming up, but my plan right now is really just to get my teeth into Modern. We can talk. I know last week we said that we would dive a bit deeper on M19, but we didn't really feel like, with the RPTQ last weekend and all this kind of Modern stuff going around, I don't feel like we've really kind of got our feet under the desk, if you will, with that.
So I have a lot of things that I think are interesting in M19, but I kind of want to talk about them in a full like in a full episode of them, whereas I actually kind of want to talk about a bit more about Modern this week.
Absolutely.
And also, I just think that a lot of things I think are interesting in M19 are going to be interesting in October.
Yep, come rotation.
Whereas I think that the things that are going to be interesting pre-rotation are going to be pretty narrow. Because it just doesn't feel like you have that many reasons to stray from the current powerful cards.
We'll have some decks to talk about next week, though. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of doing some kind of Grixis Dragonsy pile, playing the new Sarkhan, but that 75 is very loose and was scribbled down while we were eating Five Guys last night. So that's still kind of in the making, and there's a bunch of other stuff in the pipe. But as you say, we can kind of dedicate a bit more time to it, I feel, as well as probably do some more Modern Musings next week, because, yeah, I don't know, that's certainly what I'm planning on playing a lot of this week.
Yep, I think I'm in a similar situation. Albeit Cube is still up, so...
So that commands your attention.
Buddy, there's only so much Magic you can play that isn't Cube when Cube is around.
I mean, I respect that. That's cool. Do you have anything else to cover before we sign off for today?
Oh, I want to talk about one M19 card.
Okay, let's do it.
Which is my pick for the runner-up for ugliest hate card ever printed, behind Amulet of Safekeeping.
Okay, because we covered Amulet last week, I was going to say.
Yeah, we had my Amulet rant last week. This is Sun Cleanser,
okay.
which is a 1 and a white for a human cleric, which is a 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Remove all counters from target creature. It can't have counters put on it for as long as Sun Cleanser remains on the battlefield. Or, target opponent loses all counters. That player can't get counters for as long as Sun Cleanser remains on the battlefield. This barely scans as a Magic card.
Yeah, it's really weird. It reads so awkwardly. You're so upset.
It almost makes me angry.
Like I could see your face contorting around this sentence.
Removing all counters from target creature, no more counters can be placed on it, is potentially interesting, but functionally not interesting.
Right. Because
the kind of creatures that they make good in Magic that have counters on them, aside from Walking Ballista, which, I mean, I guess this is a 2-mana 1/4 that kills Walking Ballista when it enters.
Sure.
Okay. There's kind of a problem there, which is that, like...
They still get to ping your things?
Decks, well, they still get to ping all your things, and also the green-black decks, the way you hate on them is not killing a singular Walking Ballista with a Sun Cleanser, or removing all the counters from a Gear Hulk and stopping it from getting more counters placed on it. It just isn't the way you're fighting
it's
them.
It's not the axis.
Again, it feels very much like somebody made a custom card where they're like, oh, +1/+1 counter decks are good. I'll build a card that can beat the +1/+1 counter decks.
Mm-hmm.
But we already have that card. It's called Glorybringer. Like, it's really good against those decks, but it's not good against those decks because it interacts with +1/+1 counters. It's good against those decks because it interacts well with their strategy.
Yeah.
And then target opponent loses all counters is maybe the worst line of text printed on a Magic card ever.
Yeah.
So it does exactly 2 things. Okay, it does 3 things. In EDH, it removes all the experience counters from your opponent who's playing an experience counter commander. I'm gonna go ahead and say I don't care about that.
Right.
Like, maybe EDH players really wanted this card, but maybe then it could be an
sound
EDH
off in the comments.
product.
If this is changing the landscape of your EDH games, we want to know.
Yeah. But I don't think it is, and I also think that, The other use for it, of 3, we're going to get to the third one. The other use for it is if you're playing, say, like green-white Infect, you could remove all of your opponent's poison counters and prevent you from ever being able to win the game. Note that you can't remove your own poison counters.
Yes, I was going to say it's target opponent, right?
Yep. So it doesn't actually... A lot of people read this and were like, oh, this is a cool piece of sideboard hate for Infect in Modern. No, it's not. I understand why they did that. They don't want poison to be a easily interactable with resource, because then it just becomes a second life total. At the moment now, it's fundamentally like a scary, separate thing that is still kind of a second life total, but works in different ways.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just like, if you let this remove poison counters, then whatever. Third use, take all your opponent's energy. This is obviously the use it was intended for. Like, obviously. But A, they banned all the energy cards. So who cares?
Yep.
And it was only going to be an energy with energy in standard for like 3 months anyway, so who cares? And B, it doesn't do anything else.
It's a 1/4.
It just... I don't even mean that, like, maybe it even was a reasonable hate card against energy, which I still contend it wouldn't be, because Solemnity wasn't a good hate card against energy, and, like, people played that.
Yep, they did.
Occasionally, and then they'd resolve it against you, and you'd be like, yeah, okay, and then you'd either kill it, or you wouldn't. I've killed people through that with energy before. You could just not care.
They would just cast it and be like, okay, well, I guess I'll just make all of these Thopters and kill you with them because you spent 3 mana doing this.
I'll make a really big long tusk card, and then you'll die. This card, like... So even if it is an effective hate card for energy, which I almost don't care how good of a hate card against energy it is, also, it's just like... I understand that obviously when they were designing this, they didn't know they were going to ban the energy cards. I understand that. But also, this comes out and it's only with energy in standard for 3 months. So, what? We're going to hate on energy for the last little bit? Because you designed this and we were like, oh, we think energy strategies are going to be really good, but... Not so good, but good enough that we need to print a hate card for them that is so insanely narrow that the only way this is ever playable is if energy is one of the top, 2 decks in standard. But, we don't think they're going to be that good that we want hate for them prior to this point, where it's 3 months before they rotate and nobody's even playing standard. The card annoys me because it just is so purposeless. It is just... So this is a core set.
Right.
Dan, you're a new player.
Okay.
You've heard about this game, Magical Gatherings,
wow.
you think it's called?
I'm really excited.
That could be exciting.
Yeah.
There's all these different... You heard that you get to play with big dragons and sphinxes and hydras and demons. Oh, man. Oh, and this new core set, it's themed around a big evil dragon and his origins. That's cool. I don't know who Nicol Bolas is, but I see this picture and it makes me interested to play with his cards. And you open up your pack... and you're rifling through, and you see like a zombie, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And you see a small dragon, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. There's dragons everywhere. And you get to the back of the pack, and there's this unreadable pile of garbage. And you're like, well, it's a rare.
It must be good.
People told me rares were good.
Yeah, this is gold symbol.
But I don't know what this does. What counters even go on players? Yeah. What is happening? And you put down those cards on the table, and you walk out of the store, and you never play a single game of Magical Gatherings, because Sun Cleanser made you want to question everything about why you were doing anything in your life.
I'm actually teaching folks at work how to play Magic at the moment. That would be really enthusiastic, and it's great. And we're walking through how the stack works and everything like that. And I'm like, don't put the dice on the things when you have anthems, because you also have counters in your deck, and this is going to be confusing, all that kind of stuff. I couldn't imagine trying to explain to them what this card is for. Like, because I know that they're good enough that they understand what it's, like, sort of trying to accomplish, if you will, because they understand the rules of Magic, you know? But they would look at it and be like, what am I missing? You know what I mean? They'd feel like they went in on this great big secret or something, and that's... obviously poor design? I don't know. That's my take.
I think so. Sun Cleanser is runner-up for ugliest sideboard hate card ever printed behind Amulet of Safekeeping. Okay, maybe ever printed is a bit too strong. I'm sure there's some really terrible sideboard hate cards that they've printed over the years. But definitely at least an M19.
Yeah.
Sun Cleanser is runner-up. It gets the golden turd. I'll have a lot of positive things to say about M19 when we actually go into the set.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of cards that are underrated. I think there's lots of interesting things that are going to happen post-rotation. I'm really excited to see where that goes. Sarkhan, Leonin Warleader, Ajani, Tezzeret. He isn't underrated. He's just sick. I don't know.
There's lots of cool stuff.
The
wrath?
I don't know, cards.
Okay, we'll do this. Let's do this
cool.
next week. Let's do this next week.
We'll do that next week. We'll do it next week.
We'll
talk about it. Yeah. I feel like I already did my nonsense segment.
Yeah,
so.
we did that. All right.
So we can just sign off. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for listening, folks. If you like the content, then make sure that you like and share the video. I've got some big news. We have put the podcast, or Jaren has put the podcast forward for approval, or whatever the iTunes process is. And hopefully next week we'll be on iTunes. We'll be a
Hopefully this podcast will be on iTunes.
Oh, right, really?
Hopefully people will be listening on iTunes.
Maybe you're listening on iTunes right now. How is it? Is it exciting? I'm excited. So that's that. And yeah. In the meantime, if anything does fall through, actually, no, either way, subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes, because I think we're going to keep putting them on here. I don't know, we'll see, but at any rate, there's a whole bunch of other
even if we don't,
great
subscribe
content
anyway, because the channel has a bunch of content on it. And you should subscribe to the iTunes feed if you like the episodes.
Assuming it exists.
Should this be on iTunes? Because that's another good way of keeping up with what we're doing. Additionally, if you want to keep up with what we're doing, we're both on Twitter.
Yeah.
Dan is under Dan Zeru.
Yep.
And I am available as F_Ironside.
Mm-hmm.
And Jaren is also here.
He's Yasui Yasai.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a little bird in my ears telling me that apparently it could take up to 2 weeks to get on iTunes. But we'll see. Fingers crossed.
We'll see what happens.
Otherwise,
maybe things go well.
Maybe.
Let's be optimistic.
One time.
One time.
Check out Murphy's Vault at murphysvault.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, as we described. Murphy's Vault's also on Twitter. WordPress, where the articles live. There's a great big banner on murphysvault.com, which redirects you to all the good stuff that the good folks are writing. All these links are in the description. Once again, thank you very much for listening, folks. We've been From the Vault, and you've been fantastic.